we've created a really happy learning environment for children. And if children are happy and staff are happy and parents are happy, children are going to do the best they possibly can.
You teach them to be human.
It looks awfully like Wimbledon. We want a bit of spark. We want people who are interesting people. I teach maths, and
That's not interesting, is it? Come on.
the second biggest determiner of overall success is how well the student gets on with their teacher. There's nothing inappropriate has happened so far. It sounds inappropriate to me.
It's okay. Holding hand and a little peck on the cheek is okay.
If you saw two teachers doing that, what would you think?
Right?
It's the most exciting thing that's happened today. This is good.
Thank you for the example.
My pleasure. Okay.
This is Community Featuring. My name is Big and welcome to the show. So, if you follow our show closely from the start, you'll see, I'm sure, that we try to be diverse with our guests. So far we have talked to politicians, T-pop idols, K-pop idol, actors, best-selling writers, ambassador, YouTubers, TikToker, scientist, economist, CEO, beauty queens including Miss Universe, cardiologist, futurologist, and of course our favorite kind of people, teachers, all from different walks of life. But we do have our favorite subjects. We talk a lot about the future, about the education, about how the new generation can go on in this world of change, how they can improve their skills, but also how they can take better care of themselves and still being kind to each other. And today is no exception. That's exactly what we'll be talking about. So today, there's something very special. That is, we are doubly honored to welcome not one, but two people who are very good at their jobs, but most importantly, very kind as well. So please welcome from King's College Bangkok, Helen Searle and William Forse. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Big.
Hi. How's everything?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Great. Yeah. So first of all, let's start with tell us what you do at King's College Bangkok and what is your most favorite thing that you like about your job?
So my name's Will. I'm the headmaster at King's College International School Bangkok. So my role is predominantly in leading the senior school, and it's been fantastic so far.
All right. Okay. So you're basically the Dumbledore of King's College Bangkok.
When you were speaking through your list of everyone you've had on the show, I was thinking I'm definitely not a beauty queen, nor am I a politician. So I think if you compare me to the rest of the list, Dumbledore is probably the best comparison.
Yeah, hands down. All right. And Professor McGonagall?
Absolutely. Definitely not a cardiologist. So I'm Helen. I'm the head of the primary school. So I work with the children from years 1 to year 6. So from 5 years old to 11-year-olds at King's Bangkok. I've actually been with the school nearly 5 years now. So I came before we even opened our doors to children. So I came the year before to help set it all up, and write the policies and write the curriculum and recruit all the staff and the children when we first started. So I've been here right from the very beginning, really, and even sort of walking around the buildings before they were even built with our hard hats on. And looking at all the things that were happening, so it's been a really exciting journey for me. Yeah.
So head of primary school, you must be great with little kids.
I do like little kids, and actually that is the favorite part of my job is working with children and making sure that they get the best experiences that we can give them.
That's so cool. So your favorite part of the job, Will?
My favorite part of the job is. So I started as a maths teacher. Teaching maths probably still is my favorite part.
Wow. Are you still teaching classes?
I've got one year 12 class this year.
At King's College Bangkok. Of course, I think most school wants their school and their students to be the best. But I think it's impossible for everybody to be the best at everything, right? So if you can pick one one thing for King's College Bangkok to be the best at, what would it be?
I think that actually it's a really hard question because you don't want them to just be the best academically or the best socially. It's making sure that I think that every child is the best that they can be in whatever they do.
Wow.
And if I add to that, I completely agree with you, Helen. I think that what we want is to provide the best possible student experience for our pupils. I think that the outcome. I think some of the outcomes are what we often talk about in terms of being the best at. Yeah. So in terms of academic outcomes, they very much will end up being a byproduct of our students having a really broad, rich education, where they've had opportunities to do lots of different things, to find themselves, to sort of self-actualize through experience. So I think that's what I go for, a sort of a nice, well-rounded experience.
Yeah, I think that's the best. Just help each students to be their best self.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. In every single way possible.
Right. That's nice. And that's no easy job either. Yeah, because each and every students, they're all different. Yeah. So I want to ask you, how do you create the learning experience or the learning environment to suit all types of learners and students? That must be very hard.
I think it is, and I think it's very much about making sure that we give every child the opportunity to take their learning to where they can take it. So it's not one size fits all by any means. It's making sure that we find out where the children are at with their learning and then we move them on with their learning. That there's elements of moving their learning on into areas that they're interested in.
Right.
It's making sure that there's real sort of mastery built into their learning, so that not every child, achieves a certain thing. So different children achieve different things at different depths. That's obviously in the academic classroom, but then beyond that, it's making sure that they develop their other interests. So it could be sporting, it could be music, it could be chess, it could be whatever they're interested in.
Right.
Making sure that we give them the opportunity to thrive in that as well.
Yeah, and being the head of primary, I think you know better than anyone that we need to start very early too, for them to just grow up with all this environment that could help them be the best that they can be.
When you say environment as well, I think, as Helen said, she arrived before the buildings even existed. So I think that with a brand new school, you have an opportunity to build around the philosophies that you want to inculcate with your students. So we knew from the beginning that we wanted the academic excellence, the co-curricular opportunities, and the pastoral system. So when we built the school, we built it with those things in mind. In terms of the breadth of experience in the environment, all of the facilities you could possibly want are already there. It makes those things seamless. It makes it straightforward. And I know that we're finishing our new senior school building next year, and everything has been all of the conversations around architecture have been around how do we make it a space where we can have sort of how can we optimize the sort of the connectivity? How can we help our students engage with our students engage with our staff? How can we do that through really interesting spaces? So we're lucky in our environment in that we start from a beginning where we have fantastic facilities. And on top of that, in that environment, we carefully select teachers who then fill that environment with by sort of living and breathing our values. And I think that's how we create that sort of optimal environment.
Yeah. Wow. So many things to talk about and to unpack here. So we will talk in detail about each and every interesting thing or each component that helps building this school to be the best environment for students here. Okay. But I want to ask you, if I asked you to brag about one thing for King's College Bangkok, what would you like to brag about, personally?
I wouldn't like to brag about anything. I don't like that word because actually that's not what we're all about.
Okay.
There are things that we're proud of.
Okay.
But things we wouldn't brag.
I see.
But just because that makes me feel quite uncomfortable, that word. I'm very proud of the fact that we've created a really happy learning environment for children. And if children are happy and staff are happy and parents are happy, children are going to do the best that they possibly can. If they're comfortable and they're happy in their environment and they're positive, they then want to learn. And that's how we get them to achieve what we want them to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I completely agree with Helen. I think that certainly we have many successes where we should rightfully feel proud. And I know arriving at King's, what's really evident is that the values that the school describes are really authentic. The staff understand them, the children understand them. We talk about good manners and kindness and wisdom, and it's a common language and a framework which staff refer back to, which parents refer back to, which students refer back to. And because we're all speaking the same language, it means it's really embedded and that I don't think is as common as you might expect in schools.
I think very often values are sort of tagged on to the education rather than really deep inside the sort of the culture of the school. And I think only having 3 values makes it much more powerful. A lot of schools might have 10 or 11 or 12 values, and then it's really hard to then make sure that all of those are embedded. Whereas our 3 values, I think, pretty much encompass every value that you can think of within them. So, that we can unpick them, but they're very much sort of part of the DNA, if you like, of the school.
Yeah. I want to ask you first that you mentioned the UK. So tell us a little bit about King's College, Wimbledon, which is the school that has been around for like so many years.
So I've come from King's. I think it's worth saying that. So I was in the senior leadership team at King's before I came to King's Bangkok, and there are remarkable comparisons really that we could make. So from a senior school perspective, in particular, the curriculum is very much essentially the same as what we did in Wimbledon here in Bangkok. And that's quite straightforward in terms of courses up to GCSE. The A-level program at King's Wimbledon looks very similar to the A-level program that we have here in King's Bangkok. So that's very interesting. The brickwork, I know it sounds super superficial, but the actual brickwork here is very reminiscent of Wimbledon as well. So when I know for me and for colleagues who've come from Wimbledon for visits, when they arrive, the first comment is often, it looks awfully like Wimbledon, which, there's a certain nostalgia.
There is a very funny story about that too. In fact, they did bring bricks from Wimbledon, as far as I'm aware, and tried to match them. So there you are.
So some would say unnecessary, but it's very effective. In terms of what it's like being a member of staff here and at King's Wimbledon, I think that the sense of collegiality in terms of being part of a staff room where everyone's pulling in the same direction. I think that's something that's very much the same. I know that something that's been at the forefront of everyone's minds in terms of staff recruitment has been that we must match the same sort of levels of rigor in terms of recruitment process. And I know that's something that either Helen or me or Tom, the previous headmaster, every single person who's been employed has come via that channel. So there's been a huge amount of quality assurance there as well. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. I think actually when we were recruited, I mean, I was recruited by King's College Wimbledon. They obviously were looking for people who that had the same values as they did to come into the leadership team at King's Bangkok. And our executive board, obviously, when they were working with King's Wimbledon were looking at their values too to make sure that their values matched and aligned with King's Wimbledon. So very much it's part of the whole the beginning really, and that those values have then really pushed through. And I think that's one of the really, really strong similarities is that we want the same thing. Our children are obviously different. We're living in a different place. So to just pick up King's Wimbledon and put it here would be a very wrong thing to do. But certainly to take many of the strengths of King's Wimbledon, the values, elements of the curriculum, the approach to teaching and learning is very much
but the
same.
values could easily translate but in a different environment and of course
Definitely.
different culture
Yeah.
and I think that would make your job even trickier just to blend the two together like put all the best part of both worlds together.
I think in terms of the translation of values between the two schools, in Wimbledon, the school motto is Sancte et Sapienta, which means, so the Sancte part means sort of with holiness, and Sapienta refers to wisdom, essentially. So with holiness and wisdom. And the way that translates for us, I think, as kindness and good manners, that's sort of our holiness part, our spiritual part, if you will. And then the wisdom is certainly a point of commonality across the two schools.
Let's talk more about all the values. So obviously you guys have mentioned three things like wisdom, good manners, and kindness. So let's go through them one by one. So wisdom, obviously the academic part of the students. So how do you make sure that everything that you teach and they learn are still relevant and they can still be the best in the academic world if they choose to be?
Yeah, so obviously we have our curriculum that we follow. I think it's the way that we teach our curriculum. We teach it very much through a problem-solving, inquiry type of approach where children almost become the teachers themselves. So it's not about a teacher standing in front of a class and just imparting knowledge on them, because actually knowledge can be found very easily on the internet nowadays. It's more about the skills that they need for life later on. So skills like communication skills, team building skills, resilience, problem solving skills, creativity, all of those skills that they think, that mean they think out of the box. They're really important. So when we're teaching the curriculum and the knowledge part, we're also teaching those other skills alongside so that the children can be flexible thinkers, flexible learners, and versatile. So I think that's really, really important these days.
I think when I think about wisdom as a value that we have as a school, I don't think I think of it specifically as the academic part.
No, I don't.
So I think I'd describe it more as the decision-making part of learning. And I think as a school in early years, in primary, in the senior school, what we want to create people who make they carefully make decisions. I think that's the truth. So you're right. In curriculum lessons, we absolutely give them the opportunity to discover things for themselves, make choices about how they would like to learn. But I think education and what we deliver as a school is far more holistic than just the academic part. The academic part is very much what I mentioned about the three pillars. It's one of the strands, isn't it? It's one of the strands that comes alongside all of the other, or everything else we're teaching our children about how to make good choices.
Right.
So, for example, in the maths lesson, whereas there may be a specific learning point that's there, I don't think learning the quadratic formula I would describe as being wise. However, a decision they might make in applying that in sort of in a real life scenario, that I might describe more as a wisdom point. So I think it's slightly nuanced, but those sort of three values come through every aspect of life, not just the maths lessons. It could be on the sports field or in a job production.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So that makes me think about the word like book smart and street smart. They need to be both. They need to know their knowledge, and also they need to know how to survive in the real world. Like put all the knowledge into a real use.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could have a person who's got the best exam results in the world, but actually isn't very wise when it comes to using their knowledge and skills. They maybe can't work with other people. They maybe haven't got communication skills.
Right.
So it's not just about that. It is that whole. It's that whole person.
And I have learned that at King's College Bangkok, you guys provide a lot of like activities. So this is like the best answer to what we have just talked about. Just teach them knowledge, and then let's see if you can use it in the real world. So there are a lot of clubs and society, and I've heard extra curriculum, but you use different word, like right?
Yeah, so we do use the word extracurricular, but we also use the word co-curricular. So co-curricular is it's embedded in your timetable. So you have no choice but to take part in an activity which would not conventionally perhaps be described as a curriculum subject. It's something you might describe as an additional activity, but it's embedded into the curriculum.
I see.
You have no choice.
So it's required.
It's required. We place great value on our students having breadth.
Right.
And when you mention sort of book smart versus street smart, I think when we talk about street smart, what we really mean is students having a sense of self and knowing themselves. And I think that the way that we help students place themselves in the world around them is by giving them opportunities to have lots of experiences. So the co-curriculum and the extracurricular programs, those are the things where children can really identify their own strengths, when they can interact with people in a way that's not the same as the classroom, where potentially all of the interactions are managed by a teacher. I think that level of unstructuredness is actually very helpful for the pupils.
Okay, next, good manners. So when it comes to good manners, we would think, of course, like King's College, Bangkok, like British kind of good manner. So how do you teach that? And how is it different from, let's say, Thai good manners?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because that's something that we've been grappling with a bit as well.
Yeah?
Because sometimes what we, for example, in Britain, you would shake somebody's hand as a good manner, whereas you don't do that here. So it's trying to make sure that we understand sort of good manners, so universal good manners, so respect, for others, making sure that we have a good manner of the week every week. So it's all or every couple of weeks we have a good manner. So it might be to make sure that you push your chair in, or it might be picking up your rubbish, or it might be saying something kind to somebody. So
small things that count.
Small little things, like holding the door open for somebody, which is actually very much a British good manner, but we still stick with that one. So it's just those little things that make a difference.
So what is your definition of good manners?
So you mentioned about sort of reflecting on values and how they change over time. And when I think about good manners, I think about a very famous public school in the UK where their motto is "Manners maketh man," and and that certainly is a 400-old definition that they're using, but it's still sort of relevant. Exactly what Helen said. It's reinforcing basic behaviours that we would expect from respectful young people, and by making sure that those behaviours are repeated again and again, it becomes part of the psyche. It becomes part of who they are. They know what to do. People know how to treat each other, and I think that's a really good place to start from.
Yeah.
So I think good manners is very much a system of courtesy, and one where you're starting from the same place so that you can have a conversation moving forward.
Okay.
And it links with wisdom as well. You could be wise. It helps, doesn't it? It helps you become, more wise.
Yeah, like in a personal relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can get better if you have your good manners with you.
Exactly.
Yeah, besides how smart you are, but how you treat people too.
Yeah.
This is good. So the third thing, kindness. This is one of the most intangible things that you could teach, but somehow you find a way to teach manners at King's College, Bangkok too.
Yeah, I mean, kindness is very much, you can't teach it as an add-on. It's not an add-on. I think kindness is something that is really deep inside your heart. It's something that you have to start learning really from a very young age, and it's something that just becomes innate in what you do. Without even thinking about it. I think if you can do kind acts, which are kindness in a way, but it's not, doesn't mean that you're necessarily kind. Kindness is really deep inside you, and it's really where you're completely empathetic towards other people.
Yeah.
An example, just the other day, actually, it was our sports day on Friday, and it was a year 4 boy. A little girl, they were running around the track, and a little girl fell over, and he didn't even think, he stopped helped her up, and then carried on. And he actually won in the end. And I thought, you deserved to win, because of what you did. And he didn't even think about anything else apart from, she needs a bit of help. And that was genuine kindness.
Right. So someone might not be kind in their nature, but they learn how to act kind.
Yeah.
And that's not bad, but you really want them to understand why you need to be kind.
I think at one of our school, sort of school motto, a great heart takes you further. That's very much.
That's very nice.
That's very much about, kindness and your good heart. You'll go further in life because you've got that, it means you've got a positive mindset. Kindness breeds kindness, if you like. If you're genuinely kind to somebody, they're usually kind back, and it makes people's day and it makes people happier, and it's the world would just be brilliant if everybody was kind.
Right. I love that 2 out of 3 of these pillars that you have is not in the book, but it's like how you treat how you treat your friends, how you build a better relationship, and how you can genuinely be a decent and nice people for most people to want to be around you. And this is so nice that you guys put a lot of huge emphasis on this.
Yeah.
And I think with kindness as well, in the same way with manners, it's what we do as adults for those children who don't know exactly what it looks like. I think we all have an intuitive understanding. If we look at something, we could say, for example, what happened there was kind, or what happened there was a moment which wasn't quite kind. We're talking about sort of kind and unkind acts. We have an intuition for it already. So helping nudge our students in that direction is really, really important. And again, if we go back to how we select our staff, we choose people who are going to model those things. We choose people who are aligned with those values and who we believe are going to be the people who help guide our students. You said about 2 out of 3 of our values being very human oriented. And that's because schools are very, very human oriented. And in terms of student success, there's a great meta-analysis by an educationalist called John Hattie, where he looks at the impact of certain actions that teachers have on students. And the second biggest determiner of overall success is how well the student gets on with their teacher. So when we talk about our values driving what our students are doing, it's driving what our staff are doing as well. That level of interaction really is a prosperous one.
Right. So would you point out right away if you kind of observe an unkind behaviors, like, hey, this is not so much kind?
Absolutely.
Yeah, without a doubt, because they've got to, let's face it, we're all unkind from time to time. We can be, we can have a kind heart.
Even though we wanted to be kind.
We have unkind thoughts. Sometimes they go into actions, hopefully very infrequently. But, in human nature, there is an unkind element. So it's making children aware that, you can have unkind thoughts, but don't act upon them, and, think about it before. Be wise, when you decide what to do.
I really love this because it's not like you have to be kind, like 100%. And if you have a slight unkind thoughts, you're bad. It's not realistic at all.
No, and we do quite a lot, particularly in the primary school, about their children's behaviour and the zones of, we call it the zones of regulation. So there's 4 zones of regulation. There's a red zone where you're angry, and everybody gets angry. It's a normal human emotion.
Of course.
There's a blue zone, which is when you're a bit tired or a bit sad or you're feeling a bit under the weather. We all feel that from time to time. There's a yellow zone where you might be a bit restless or a bit excited. And again, that's a normal emotion. And then there's the green zone where everything's just, working well, and, you're in the zone for learning, you're in the zone for the best behavior. And it's teaching children to identify what zone they're in and to get them back into the green zone. It doesn't mean that those other zones are bad or wrong, because we're all human, and we all have those different emotions, we all have those different thoughts. It's making sure that we control them.
This is my favorite so far. You teach them to be human because in some fierce or super competitive environment, maybe some school or other institution might want their student to be like a robot. Like you have to do this and you have to be the best and you have to, you cannot be bad at all. And that's not natural at all.
I mean, mistakes are very much part of our curriculum, if you like. You know, marvelous mistakes we call them, and you know, mistakes are there to learn from. You don't want to make the same mistake over and over again, obviously. But actually failing. You learn from it. And one thing that I love about in Finland, they have a National Day of Failing. And actually, it's valuing the fact that we all make mistakes, and that's how we move on, and that's how we learn. And if you want to be a risk taker, you're going to make mistakes. It's part of it.
Of course.
And if you want to be successful, you're going to make mistakes. And it's accepting that those mistakes are okay, not blaming somebody if the mistakes are there, but teaching them to learn and move on from those mistakes.
Yeah, that's great. We need to adopt that, like failing days. And please learn from that. Yeah, you can make different kinds of mistakes, but don't repeat the same old ones.
Do you mind if I add to that point as well? So what Helen was saying about no person is infallible. It's so true. And I know that it is important that the phrase we use often is what we don't challenge, we condone. So absolutely, every time there is a mistake, of course we challenge it.
Right.
When we do challenge it, the conversations that we'll have with students is around it's not you that we're talking about, it's the behavior that we're talking about.
Right.
And keeping those two things very separate. Because we can all make mistakes with our behavior, but that doesn't mean that we're a bad person and it can't be recovered by any means. And absolutely move
and
forwards.
getting those children to actually identify where they've gone wrong themselves rather than us telling them, obviously, is much more powerful too.
Yeah, that's so great.
Choices.
Yeah, you're not a bad person, but what you did
was not right.
that's not right.
Yeah.
That's so good. Okay, so games. Do you like games?
Depends what the game is.
Slightly worried now.
Okay, so because I want to know, what would you do? Because from what you told us, you've got such a healthy and great mindset, especially for teachers to teach their students. So in here, there are some hypothetical what-if questions or situations. So I want to know what would you do in each situation. So this is how it works. Helen pick one and then read it to Will, and then we'll answer. And you can share your thoughts as well, and then we can take turns.
Be interesting to see if we have very different skews.
Yeah, I want to see that. Okay.
All right, let's see.
Okay. All right.
I hope it's in big print because I haven't got my glasses on. Okay.
So this is for Will.
Okay. A student opens up to you. I've decided to pursue my career in entertainment. I was scouted and trained as an idol for some time now, and it's going great. Is it okay if I'm not the best academically, like you might expect me to be? I'll make sure I pass all my exams and turn in all the assignments, though. What do you do?
Okay. So that's a great question, Helen. Thank you.
Yeah, so I thought of it myself.
So I think first and foremost, we're incredibly supportive as a school. And I would hope that anyone who's asked that or that came to their attention, we would say, that's incredible. It's amazing that you have that experience. It's interesting that they have that self-perception that they're not the best academically. I struggle with phrases like that because I'm not sure what that means. I think what I hope it means is that they're not yet confident academically, because that's something certainly that we could work on together with them. And in terms of they'll still do their exams and they'll still get the grades, that's not really what school's all about. That's a byproduct of an effective schooling, right? So I think certainly the advice would be, let's see what we can do to support you with this incredible career outside of school, alongside what we're doing with schoolwork. I think the two things need not be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and I think I would actually hope that we wouldn't have a child that would say that to us.
Oh, okay.
Because I actually think that they would know that we valued their passions, because one of the things I think that makes us that's really powerful and really important is that we know the children inside out. So I would hope that we would know that was their skill. Everybody's got a different skill set. And if that's the way they wanted to go, we would obviously support them with their exams because you never know. You've got them there. But we certainly, I would hope that they would know that that's something that we would be encouraging them.
Oh, okay. So you mean that you wish that the students wouldn't feel so terrified of what you might react if they kind of choose to do something different from your expectations.
Yeah, because that would be, I don't think this would be different. I think it would be something that we would encourage from day one through our sort of extracurricular program and having that breadth of education.
Right.
Although the academics is really important, it's about the child achieving what they, going back to what I said at the beginning really, what they want to achieve and where they want to be in the future. And we don't want children just to follow that mold. We want them to think and we want them to be different. We want them to be individuals. I think that's really important.
Would you voice any concern to them?
I wouldn't voice concern to them, but I think that it seems that they're concerned about society's opinion rather than thinking what's best for them or what they want. And actually, often your success is going to be born from where does your passion lie. Now, that doesn't mean you have to abandon schooling. It sounds like they want to abandon schooling a little bit, but I think that's.
It seems that they're not going to abandon schooling, but they just make sure that as long as I pass, is it okay if I can go and pursue something else? But I make sure I'm not going to fail.
I think there's definitely a line, isn't there, between compliance and engagement. And I think what we really want is we want all of our children to really engage with what's happening because they understand that education is meaningful. And it sounds like that message has been slightly lost.
Right.
What I would say is I know that we have a few people who fit this mold pretty nicely, who do really well at school actually, as well as doing those things alongside. So I think that there's definitely a case that you can do both.
Yeah. All right, great. So next. So this time we'll pick one.
Oh, okay.
All right.
It's the most exciting thing that's happened today. This is good. Right. Okay. So that's a good one, Helen. A parent barges into your office one afternoon. They're going to exclaim, "My kid would never do anything like that. You lied."
Ooh.
What would you do?
All right, well...
First of all, has that happened to you before?
Yeah, many times.
Yeah, for
or
sure,
maybe
right?
not, I don't think
Very
they've actually ever said
understandable.
I lied, but they have barged into my room. I would basically make sure that they're obviously they're angry. They're in that red zone that I was talking about earlier. So I need to try and get them back into the green zone. So I would let them talk. There's no point me interfering. They're not in a rational mindset.
Just vent.
Yeah. So I would let them vent and I would let them talk and I would listen.
Okay.
And once they'd got it out of their system, which they would after a while, I would then, try and talk rationally to them. I would try and explain to them, their child, I fully understand that, they want the best for their child. I wouldn't have ever sort of told a child off or anything or contacted a parent unless I was sure of the facts beforehand. But I would listen to them and then I would go through where I was coming from again and try and, in a really calm, kind way and understand that, they might be upset about it, but how we can move on from here, how we can help their child progress on, how we can help their child learn from their mistakes because they are young children, and how we can, and how they can help and how, we can help as a school. And, actually every time I've had a conversation like this, it's come out okay at the end. So it's about almost sort of counselling the parent through the situation and making sure that they understand where you've come from as well, and they're not just blinkered into their own child because that's what parents are. Their own child is the most important thing to them, and rightly so. And if it's not, then there's something wrong. But it's trying to get them to rationalise it, to calm down.
Yeah. Would you do the same thing or anything differently?
I think that education is so emotionally charged from the get-go because everything that you say to a parent about their child, it always feels personal. And parents are absolutely predisposed to want to protect their children And whether that's rational or irrational, sometimes you don't know until you start that conversation. It's but absolutely, it's really, really important that we let parents have that opportunity to speak to us so that we can hear, certainly from their perspective, if nothing else, how they feel, because that's important. When we think about successful schooling, the three parts of that are the relationship between sort of the teachers and the parents and the child. So each of those interactions is really important. So us and the parents working together is absolutely crucial. Us working with the students is totally crucial. And us making sure that the parents and the students are getting on really well is really crucial. So if any part of that triangle falls apart, then we're going to struggle to have a really meaningful, collaborative approach to that child's education. So it's of paramount importance that we have a really good relationship with parents. So the first step is certainly to listen. And then we'll go from there.
I think what you do as teachers are so admirable that you can listen patiently without trying to like judge or trying to like excuse or make any excuses. I think that's one of the hardest things to do.
Yes and no, because I think ultimately everyone has the same aim. We want the child who's at the center of everything to make the progress. And ultimately, I think that we understand by us being defensive or counter-aggressive is simply not helpful. And there's nothing to be gained from it. Now they're not our child. They're a child who's at our school. So for the parent, obviously, it's perfectly reasonable to be angry or emotional. Absolutely. We need to be the most level-headed person in that relationship at all times.
Because we want the same for the child. You know, we want exactly the same as the parents. Just don't they, parents sometimes don't see that if they've come, at something from an angry point of view.
Right. So they of course play a very important roles in helping a child to go where they need to go. So I've even heard that you actually interview all the parents yourself too.
Yeah, so parents will always be interviewed by a member of senior leadership, and I think that it's really important for us that at the point of entry, we know that the parents are aligned with the school's values. We keep on saying about school's values, but it's very important because the relationship between us and parents is a really crucial one. And parents need to know from day one that it's going to be a collaboration and that parents aren't dropping their children off with us. We often refer to parents as the first educators. They're the first ones who are going to introduce certain concepts, certain moralities and ethical issues. They're going to appear at home more likely than they'll appear at school first. So it's important that we're all speaking the same language.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point schools and parents working against each other because that the child is in the middle of that and that child's not going to thrive.
Right. So you have to make sure that they know that they have to be available and they need to collaborate, like working together with school to help the children. What else do you need to make sure that they know?
We try and ensure that they do sort of embody our values so that we do try and sort of get a feeling if they're kind parents and if they if they do hold our values. And also to make sure that they want the same for their children as we do. If they want a school which sort of spoon feeds children to pass an exam, as isn't the right school for them. So to make sure that they want those opportunities for their child, they want their child to thrive in other areas as well as academically. I mean, we very much believe that if you thrive in other areas, actually academically you do better because you're building that whole person. So we've got to make sure that parents understand that too.
Yeah, you need to be on the same page. In terms of how things are done or should be done. Okay.
Yeah, I think just emphasis of it not being a for or against relationship, it being a with relationship, us working with the parents is really important.
I see.
We don't expect parents to know all the answers, by the way. And if parents need support, we will provide support for parents when it comes to parenting. And there are some amazing things that they do, particularly in early years and primary. And me as an early years parent, I will benefit an awful lot from being told what I should be doing with my children from Raj.
We run parenting classes actually.
That's nice.
Which is a 10-week course that expert parents come on, teaching them how to be a better parent. And, because being a parent is not an easy job. And it's not it's not a tick box. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? My child's going to turn out perfectly. There's lots of trial and error. And every child's different. Like teaching, really. You have to make sure that you cater for all of the children. And so we run parenting courses where parents have the opportunity to talk about the challenges that they have and things that they can do to help their relationship with their child and help their child's behavior and all of that.
Your turn.
Right. Okay, here we go. Okay. So a student comes to you and says, I'm not good at anything. I keep trying, but nothing works. I don't even know what I want to do with my life.
Oh, poor child.
What do you do?
I would sit down and talk to that child, not on one occasion, on many occasions. I would constantly be checking in with that child to check that they're okay. I would sit down with them and I'd talk to them about all the good things about them and get them to, I try and identify those good things themselves. Who are your friends? What CCAs do you do? What ECAs do you do? What do you do outside of school? I would, look at some of the work that they've been doing in school, something to make them proud of that, what they enjoy doing. I would speak to their teacher. Because I would actually, it would be a big concern to me if a child was feeling that low. And I would ask the teacher if they could see anything in the classroom that would indicate that child's really unhappy. Probably would speak to the parents as well to say that I'm a bit worried about your child. They're feeling they've got really low self-esteem. And see if there's anything happening at home or any changes in their life that might be triggering that lack of self-esteem. I would probably also refer them to the school counsellor so that they could have somebody else that they could talk to, another trusted adult that they could talk to. In school, we have a system where children have trusted adults. So they choose people that they consider to be their trusted adults, both in school and outside of school. So if, for example, their parent wasn't a trusted adult, because it might not be, we would probably not necessarily speak to parents. We would speak to other people as well. So we'd look at the whole picture, and we'd really work with that child, because it's not just, it could be just sitting down and, they're okay after that. But actually the chances are, if they've come to you to say that they're really not happy and they feel as if they're not good at anything, it's probably a bit more embedded, and they need some support to help them get through it.
I see. So for you?
Yeah, it's definitely a similar approach. I think a conversation around the child with all the teachers and the parents and looking at the friendship group and all those sorts of things. I think a phrase I heard recently that comparison is the thief of joy. I think that's something that we have at the forefront of our minds in a world which is very social media oriented, and the nature of comparison in schools for some children is that they want to compare how they did to other friends in their class, whereas actually for what they've done might be great, and it's really important that they get that messaging. And if they haven't had it, then that would be something that we certainly would follow up. I think that knowing that they are themselves and that is enough, I think is a message that's often reiterated but not always heard by teenagers.
It's very delicate issues, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it might be something totally different from what is seen from the outside. Maybe it's something inside. I like how you point out that maybe it's not them, but it's how they compare themselves to others. And of course, if you keep checking the social media all the time, you will definitely see someone who's better than you. And if they're not strong enough in here, that self-esteem might get hurt.
And it could be something that's happening at home. It could be their parents telling them they're not good enough. I want you to be better. I want you to do better at that. And parents do that because they want their child to be the best. And actually, it's a form of sort of emotional abuse, really. And actually, it can really, really affect a child's self-esteem.
And sometimes they didn't even mean no harm. Like,
absolutely. They want the best for their child, so they tell them, you need to be better, you need to do that better, you need to pass that exam, you need to get a higher grade. And
they think they're helping them.
And actually they're not, they're causing damage.
Okay, let's play another round. Last round. Okay, this is fun.
Okay. Okay, lovey-dovey public displays of affection from a couple of lovebirds. Nothing inappropriate so far, and they're both great kids, never getting themselves into trouble before. But is it a little bit too much? You can't help but wonder. What do you do?
Okay.
That's good for senior. We don't get that in primary.
It says nothing inappropriate has happened so far. It sounds inappropriate to me. I think that we recognise that people are exploring relationships whilst they're at school. It's inevitable. But at the same time, particularly with our older students, they're role modelling what that should look like for younger students. And you are always on display is the reality at school. So anything where there are public displays of affection, they're quickly addressed. And conversations around what's appropriate for school and what's not appropriate for school are certainly had. I think it's tricky, isn't it? Like if there's two great kids, it can be an awkward conversation.
Right.
But it's an awkward conversation that we're quite willing to have to try and model what's best for the community.
And it links with values, doesn't it?
It does.
It links with good manners.
Yeah.
Actually, if you've got 5-year-olds walking around and you're canoodling in the corner, it's not the right thing for them to be seeing.
Yeah.
And it's not wise either, So yeah.
But I can't think of like the argument, the made up argument in my head right now is that it's okay. Like nowadays, this is okay. Maybe they see the values differently. Like, okay, good manners have changed.
Yeah.
But this is like holding hand and a little peck on the cheek is okay. What if they like say some things like that back to you? Like,
I think that the teenage psyche is one that is predisposed to say things like "that's not fair," and I think that's a conversation that we frequently have. I think that the providing a rational argument along the lines of you are the role model for the rest of the community, and what you think may be quite innocent may be viewed quite differently by a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old who's looking up to you.
Parent.
Or a 5-year-old's parent.
Oh yeah.
But I think that's it, isn't it? It's really important that our students always understand, particularly the ones who are really good kids, as it says. It's really important that they understand that it's up to them to uphold the standards. Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. So just remind them that this is not just about you, but you kind of affect everybody else in your community and in your environment too.
Yeah, you're part of the wider community.
Yeah.
And we are ultimately preparing them for the workplace. If you're doing something which people would be offended by in the workplace, you should probably not be doing it at school.
And I mean, likewise, I suppose you could say, if you saw 2 teachers doing that, what would you think? And
that's
actually,
such a good
they
point.
would be, oh God, that's not right. So it's the same.
Thank you for reminding me that. I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, I'll stop doing that from now on.
Very much like if they're wearing uniform not in the right way, you could say, how would you feel if I wore it like that? Exactly. Me wearing a crop top, for example.
Oh dear.
Exactly.
Definitely
Just not appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you for the example.
My pleasure.
Okay, last one. Okay.
Is it?
I think it's your turn.
Yeah, your turn.
Right, okay. So, you praise a student for a job well done on their essay. Thanks, they reply with a big smile. I'm glad you like it. ChatGPT did most of the heavy lifting, though. What do you do?
Well, if it was a primary child, I'd say you're too young to use ChatGPT. No.
But for primary, you're not going to let them use ChatGPT?
No, we don't.
Okay. Would you use them internet or Google?
Yes.
Of course.
Okay. So it is a similar sort of thing, I suppose.
Okay.
No, so I would say, actually, it is a great essay. How much did you use your brain to think for it? Did you use ChatGPT? Because I think it's something we do need to teach children to use. My son's at university and he uses it. I'd say, use it, but think about it really carefully. Use it, and how can you use it to your best advantage? You still need to think, because if you're not thinking, that's when the real problems arise. So you've got to use it. You've got to use it wisely. You've got to think. I would also probably think about whether we've done enough digital citizenship work. and whether we've done enough of that using, in sort of computing lessons and also within the classrooms, making sure that children are taught how to use AI correctly and sensibly. I mean, AI is there. We've probably all used it, I've used it.
It's like using internet.
It is.
Right?
And so we've got to use it wisely. Again, values. And we've got to use it to help us. But actually, if we use it without thinking and without it, we're gonna slip up at some point.
Sure, yeah. Will?
Yeah, I think if you think about what the actual problem is with the ChatGPT adding to the essay in a significant way, I suppose the issue with that is the lack of thinking, right? Now, what we want to do is we want to prepare our learners to be able to deal with problems and to be able to answer questions. Now, if they're using ChatGPT to generate evaluation points for an essay, that's a perfectly valid form of research. Whether or not they choose to then go and check that what's in there is a good argument or a bad argument, and whether they want to include it or not include it is completely separate. I suppose the biggest danger I can see using ChatGPT tool regularly is a tool like that. Particularly for any of our learners where English is not their first language, if they're developing the strength of their written English, ChatGPT writes in a very specific American sort of way. It's not the typical prose that you would expect from a student, and I don't think we want all of our children to become this homogenous blob where they all write and sound exactly the same and become slightly robotic. I think what we really want is for them to develop their own style and to be able to write confidently in English. And I suppose the less you use those skills, the less muscle memory you'll have. So by all means, ChatGPT is a research tool or something to help you start something. I think it's really powerful. But to use it regularly in place of your own thought, it has the potential to breed laziness and that complacency that can come from that laziness ultimately is not going to have a positive effect.
Yeah, and there are times as well, obviously, where you can't use it. And actually you've got to be able to think. And it's quite interesting actually because we've just been recruiting at the moment, and some teachers have clearly used ChatGPT in their letters of application, and we haven't looked at them. Because you can tell very often. Because they're not personalised to the school or
that's the
whatever.
thing too. You can tell. You can still tell that this is not your work.
Very often you can, and you can think that's not written like I would imagine you to write. So you have to be careful with it.
I was going to ask you about how you recruit teachers, so to speak. How you choose teachers. How do you know who got a teacher's material for King's College Bangkok? How do you do that?
It's a combination of many things. So from the outset, letters of application are very important. We're very interested in why they think they fit the school, and if they don't understand that we're a values-led organisation, then that makes it very difficult to even begin interviewing them. We certainly want to recruit academically able teachers who have a wealth of experience. But then when we meet them at interview, we certainly look at whether or not they're going to align with the ethos of the school, whether or not they're going to be able to work with the staff room in the same collaborative way that we expect all of the teachers, and we want a bit of spark. We want people who are interesting people, and I think ultimately, if you were to think back about all of your teachers at school, there'll be some where you know immediately a conversation with them was inspiring, and they helped extend whatever you're doing to the next level. That's the kind of person that we want.
So talk more about being interesting as a teacher.
I think that I think that so I teach maths, and
That's not interesting, is it? Come on.
and when you speak to people, they'll either say it's not interesting, or they'll say, "Oh, I absolutely
fascinating.
love maths." So it's a bit Marmite, but I think that's actually more true of many other subjects than perhaps we.
No, it's the
realise,
way you
right?
deliver the maths.
True.
Absolutely.
Maybe I just had bad maths teachers at school.
But if earlier on I mentioned about interpersonal relationships with the students, actually it's making sure that you're speaking to their interests, and that you deliver things in a way that is very human. Even if you're discussing a very abstract concept, there's nothing which I don't think you can relate to people or describe in a way that is engaging. I think teaching to a level is a little performative, and I think it is important that students are buying into what's happening in front of them,
Right.
And that basic level of engagement and the trust and the understanding that you develop with those pupils helps them get on board.
Yeah. I mean, when I'm interviewing, it's very much about a teacher who, can go through the questions. I mean, some people answer the questions absolutely faultlessly, and you just think, no, you're not right for us.
Right.
Because it doesn't come across they've got a real love of children. And I think it's that real love and that real passion, and that, again, being prepared to make mistakes and admit to them. And, a teacher who's, if you say, what risk have you taken? Has it gone wrong? It's making sure that, they say, yeah, I had a risk and it went wrong. And then I did this and I did this and I did this. So it's making sure that, they're human.
Yeah.
And that they...
that person is interesting
that
to me.
person is interesting. Wants to take a risk. Wants to do some really crazy things with the children. Make education, make learning alive.
Right.
Yeah.
We also do watch lessons. So they either come into school to teach, or we ask for recordings of lessons that they've done.
Yeah.
And when we ask for recordings, that will show some of the pedagogy that we believe in, because we want somebody who's going to make children really enthusiastic and enthused about their learning and really excited and happy.
Yeah. You're going to be inspired by someone who has a palpable passion. If the person in front of you appears bored, then you are naturally yourself not going to be inclined to engage in the lesson.
That's right. Yeah,
Same
because I
when you're
can think of so
Absolutely,
many
yeah.
teachers from my past that they always look bored. And do you even want to be here?
Yeah.
And
I think
teach
it's
us?
about trying to find teachers who actually want to teach because they love children, rather than just, I don't know what job to do, I'm going to go into teaching, or I'm just going to go through, it's a job rather than a passion. And I think if you can find people who see it as a job and a passion, then you're going along the right lines.
And you regularly get that. You get teachers who absolutely live and breathe their subject, and they're the people who want.
Yeah.
And those are teachers that we can still remember and
Definitely.
always remember them and be thankful to them that I'm so glad that I had you as my teachers.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Right. And people talk about how the role of teachers have changed also. So they used to be like one-way communication. They talk in front of class and they kind of, listen to what I speak and write everything down, memorize it, and then come back and do great on the test, right? So just teach. And then we kind of have the teacher who have become a facilitator of the learning. So what other roles do you think that teachers nowadays kind of play in students' life?
Yeah, I think it varies ever so slightly, by the way, through the school. The sort of didactic model that you described initially, that certainly is one that you still see often in university lectures. But even with the older students in the school, we'd expect a sort of an active learning environment. We'd expect them to be really engaged and doing an awful lot of the work themselves. The sort of rule of thumb that we normally have is if a teacher's spoken for more than about 15% of the lesson, then something's probably not going right. So in terms of what you were likely to see or what would it feel like to be in a lesson, hopefully it would feel the same in year 13 as it does in year 7. Right. I know I've worked in schools in the past, certainly, where there's been a more grown-up approach being a didactic style lecture, but actually there's nothing that supports that as a model of teaching and learning, and it's something I'm very, very keen for us to steer away from.
Yeah, I think it's very much if you go into a lesson, seeing children thinking. Because actually, if a teacher's standing at the front just delivering and imparting knowledge, children aren't thinking. I mean, they're going through the motions of writing notes, whatever. But they're not thinking. It's getting the children to think out of the box. And again, that's where you need creative teachers because, creative teachers will be thinking about how children can think. And you mentioned facilitators rather than teachers, which I think is very, very important. It's making sure that, as you said, the children do the work. But actually, it's harder for the teacher, for the children to do the work because they've got to plan ahead and think, right, okay, what can I give the children to make sure that they're thinking, to make sure that they're doing the work, to make sure that they're learning what they need to learn and providing them with that opportunity and then providing them with the questioning and the questions to move their learning on and to think further and further and further. And actually, what's so lovely when you teach like that is that children surprise you all the time, even the little children. I was in year 1 the other day, and this child was writing a book about the solar system. And if we'd been teaching year 1 about the solar system, we'd probably said, the moon and the sun and the star, whatever. This child was going into so much depth about the different planets and what they were all about, and it's so much. And he was writing a book. And, we would never have taught him that at the age of 5, but he was going in a direction that he loved. His writing was better than it would have been because he was writing about something he was passionate about. His understanding of science was because we were then questioning him and moving his learning on and giving him books that were related to what he was interested in. So actually, his learning experience was way, way beyond what it would have been had we decided we were going to teach the solar system to year 1.
Wow. So I've got a question for you guys, which is, I think it's personal. If you can put one personal value into your 3 existing ones, which is good manners, wisdom, and kindness, what would it be and why?
Personal value.
I think I would go with belonging because I think that something that is really important, particularly when you're in a school, is a sense of community. And in terms of the values, I think you would see if you were to come into King's, I think one of the first things people would comment on, alongside our other values, would certainly be that sense of community that we've that we've built. And I think a community only really work if people feel part of it. And belongingness is a really important thing that we all do a huge amount to work towards already. I think it's a sort of a core belief. So I'd say it would be a value.
Yeah, that's great value. Helen?
I think within our context, I think maybe if I was in a different context, it would be different. But I think something that we could add to our values at our school would be humility. Because our children are very privileged. And I think one of the things that we really teach them is, however privileged and lucky you are, you need to understand. You need to be empathetic as well, I suppose, humility and empathy. You need to be humble, because that's a real strength of character.
Wow. Yeah, another great value. Wow. Okay, last questions. Since our show is called Kamnidi, which in Thai means that's a good word. So I want to know if you have your personal favorite word. It doesn't have to do with teaching or school, but just the word that you like. Do you have any word like that?
So I've got a daughter who's about to turn 2, and she's just learning words for the first time at the moment. And Alice, our deputy head of early years, showed me the Makaton sort of sign language thing for family, which is sort of family. And we showed her once, and now she'll go around and she'll point at our other baby and my wife and me, and she'll go, Daddy, family, Mummy, family, Jasper,
nice.
family. And I quite like that. I think sort of in a wider context, I know being in international school, being part of a community overseas at the moment, I know certainly that that the family aspect, when you feel like you're on an island a little bit when you're in an international school, I think family is a really important theme in my life at the moment.
I think it's a really hard question. Maybe experiences.
Experiences.
Yeah, because I think experiences is what makes anybody's life richer, and it can be there's so many things that you can have, you know, for experiences, and but there are other words too that would be
Well, they
equally
just
important.
another time that it has proven to be true for me that it's always fun talking to teachers, and teachers will always be our favorite guest on my show. So thank you so much for coming. I would like to end the show by going back to what Helen said earlier about happiness. I really like that because it is so simple and yet still pretty hard to pull off sometimes. And it depends on so many things. And there are so many phases of happiness. But I think it's very important to have a happy school life and a happy place that students want to wake up in the morning and really want to go and have a happy experience. So thank you so much for the word happiness that you have mentioned on the show.
And teachers too. It's important for them to.
Oh yeah.
Because otherwise the children aren't.
All right. For all the triangle of success,
parents,
right? So teachers are happy, students are happy, parents are happy. So
The world's a brilliant place. Beautiful place if everybody.
what's better than that? Thank you so much, Will
Thank
and
you.
Helen.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Pleasure.